So in the past, I worked for a security company where I was contracted out to bounce at nightclubs and do other things. I even helped a PI on a pretty risky little case, and it was a real thing. And I got quite a bit of experience with it. Some days I wish I would have stuck with it, but the hard truth is security work is dangerous, and both physically and legally. I can't emphasize that enough. It's a rough job that doesn't pay nearly enough for the times where you do have issues, and obviously a lot of the times it can be boring. But one thing I want to get out there is just a few tips from what I've learned and were taught to me, and it kind of like the I guess by a few old veterans in the area here. And this isn't necessarily to protect you physically, but this is actually to protect you legally, because in the end, when you're a security guard and you're in court, whew, like the company's lawyers, if it's a business that's trying to go after the company for liability and whatnot, that's all they care about. They see you as a punching bag and just a target. And if you have a dirty prosecutor, they will turn everything that you did that night into a case where you were the offender. It's absolutely ridiculous, and you wouldn't believe. You think you're just a guy trying to protect a company's assets, and then it turns around that you were the one that was actually at fault for seeing that they had a loss. So I'm just going to get into a few myths and debunks here. For one, well, I'm going to debunk some myths that I think are kind of, it's a gray area in advice, and it really depends where you live. Like, I'm sure in Texas, security guards get to walk around with guns and stuff, and it's a lot different compared to here in Canada. But just on a really grounded basis, obviously Canada is a good filter and example to provide the most legal aspect of it all. And this is primarily for, I guess, Canadian security guards as well as ones with similar laws. So the tactical pen trap. The tactical pens are a pretty fad thing, and a lot of guys think they're tough with them. In all honesty, they don't really do that much damage. They're better than nothing. And yes, against some people, I'm sure that they would have enough force to have, bring upon some compliancy. But really, all you're looking to have done is get charged with a weapon, especially if you use it against somebody. So in a court case, a tactical pen is going to eat you apart. Don't carry a tactical pen. Not only that, but it's a pen. It's useless in the cold. It has a hard time writing on the sides. Sometimes they just jam up, etc. It's really not that good of a tool. Carry just a pencil and some paper. You can write upside down. It'll always work in the cold. And you never want to use a pencil as a weapon, obviously. It's just a tool, but carry a pencil and paper. It will never fail you. The second trap is the clipboard shield. I've seen some guys like that idea. This is the craziest thing a lot of people will find surprising. In some places, as soon as you try and carry something, or if you use something that can essentially be used in a defensive purpose, the prosecutor will essentially say that you knew that area was dangerous and you prepared yourself offensively to basically be a vigilante. There's court cases like that. And that includes even if you put a heavy book in a backpack and wear it to the front because you're a security guard that likes to read, and obviously you were afraid to keep the book and the backpack in the office because you just don't know, it's night and someone could have broken in and taken your merchandise. So it's sad because a book in a backpack isn't a weapon. It isn't, or defensive, shield. But a prosecutor will do that if it turns out that somebody attacks you while you had your backpack in the front. As a last resort to protect yourself, it might not be a bad idea, but the clipboard, that is terrible. It's a small area, it'll break, and it's garbage. I think having something in a backpack would probably work a lot better. But remember, that's not to ever be used as a shield, just a last improvisation of defense if you're on a night shift. The next would be this is going to anger a lot of people if people get around to it. The massive 4D cell flashlight. Now, a lot of guys assume that this is a perfect improvised weapon and whatnot. In reality, it wouldn't feel good to get bonked with a big flashlight. But in some places, It's still going to be considered a weapon if you do use it. But the biggest thing is it's just clunky, and it actually might not do as much damage to someone as people think. It is essentially like a club, but it's heavy and it's cumbersome, and it's not that great. And it's hard to control in situations where you really need to be swift and whatnot. The one kind of flashlight I'd recommend is just a small handheld flashlight with a strobe on it. If you can take away a person's night vision and whatnot, you can back up out of there and get the heck away from them. The next debunk here is it depends what work site you're at, but heavy boots. A lot of guys have this idea that they're gonna, practice some taekwondo that night or something. Heavy boots will just slow you down. If you can wear sneakers and just runners, that's the best option. It depends on the work site. Some work sites, obviously, if you're working alone at night and it's a lumber yard or whatnot, they'll actually suggest that you have steel toe boots on because it's still patrolling, the work site. But if you can wear just regular sneakers, I highly suggest that, because distance and observation are your number one priorities, really, in a conflicting situation when you're a security guard. You're not getting paid enough to engage, right? That's why you phone the police. All right, so now we're going to get into the legal aspects and the items that I would carry and I was taught to carry by some old school veteran kind of security guys. So there were job sites where we would be working alone, and it's just always best to stay safe. Like I said, security guards, a lot of them don't get paid enough to do what they do. They're there to observe and just protect assets. That's what you're getting paid for. So the last thing you ever want to do is engage with somebody. And I'm going to give some really interesting little tips here that a lot of people haven't shared online. So the first one is actually door wedges and a door cane. If the thing is, if you're on property and people sneak in and they have ill intent, it's nothing. If they're already committing a break and enter, there's a good chance that they're not going to value your safety or health. So with that, that's when you actually, you want to barricade yourself in a door and call for help. And a door wedge can assist you in that quite greatly. The same with the door cane. The next thing would be a multi-tool. It's perfectly legal to carry just a multi-tool knife. You just never know when you might have to pry something or cut into a box, etc. They're handy. They usually have screwdrivers on them too. They're good. The next thing's very unorthodox, but you have to have written approval, and that's a rescue tool. And what I mean by that is a pry bar of some kind. I would suggest a pry bar hammer synergy. But like I said, this is not a weapon. This is strictly a tool. And you do have to have written permission by both your contractor and obviously the site management. A lot of them will approve it, though. If you're working late at night and there's limited fire exits and such, or there's a situation where you have to pry open a door to save yourself. If there's intruders getting towards you and you have to pry open a window, obviously it's a great tool, right? Like I said, those synergies between a pry bar and a hammer are probably the best thing you can get. The next thing would be a first aid kit. And now I'm just going to throw a disclaimer here too. I am not a professional. This is for entertainment purposes only, and please seek the assistance of a professional in your registered, area and state or province regarding security work. But regarding a first aid kit, this is a very sensitive legal situation. Now, it's good to carry one, but if you do not have first aid training, even if you do, my suggestion would be, and it depends on where you live, if a person's able to help themselves, first ask them if they would like the first aid supplies, and then you can offer them some. Obviously, it's just good to carry a tourniquet and some other basic supplies, some disinfectant. And but never apply the first aid to a person, yourself, because you can be found liable even with the training, depending on what's happened. Now, the only instance I'll say you should probably stop someone from bleeding is if they're unconscious and the wound is bad. Then under legal authority, in most places, but check yourself, it's actually your duty. It's almost your duty to bandage them up if they're bleeding quite bad and they're unable to themselves. But that's why it's always good to get first aid training if you are getting into the security industry. The next thing is, this is a really unorthodox one, but it's a handy thing, is a power bank. Your phone is your primary tool, like these days, obviously, in security work, whether it's filming something or just calling emergency services. If the power goes out or if somebody cuts the power, you're in trouble if you were watching silly videos all night on your phone and you didn't bring a power bank. It's good to have a little small phone power bank. Now the next thing, this is a really interesting little veteran tip. I don't think I've ever seen this online, but a collapsible rubber cup of some kind, or even just a rubber cup, a plastic cup, something that's not going to break. And the reason I say this, it's not just for drinking water or putting something in or whatnot, but it's actually for that little flashlight I was telling you about, just a handheld one. What you can do is you can essentially, if you're in a room and you need a large area lit up, you can put that flashlight actually just in the cup, and so it stands straight up and it'll illuminate the area. A lot of those flashlights still stand straight on their own depending, but they fall over fairly easily. And if you're in a warehouse or something close to train tracks, yeah, they're just going to keep collapsing over, and the cup just keeps it a little handier. Not only that, but with the cup, you can put it at a good angle, and if you put the cup down on the floor, you can obviously put your wallet or something in the cup so that the flashlight's propped up at a higher angle, and you can adjust it a bit. It's a good little tool. And the last thing would be mechanical gloves. It's not your job to ever really have to clean anything up or move things, but in an emergency, you don't want to get certain fluids on your hands, and you don't want to be touching anything that could cut you or whatever else. They're just handy to have. But like I said, be very careful with the armor thing. Some guys think they need to get these Kevlar wrist sleeves and all this other stuff, but in reality, you know, a prosecutor can eat you alive for it. Like I said, most security guards, depending what kind of security you're doing, you're there to observe and report. That's it. As soon as you start loading yourself and arming yourself to the teeth with improvised weapons, you're gonna get yourself in trouble. Be very cautious with that. But first and foremost, like I said, I'm not a professional. This is for entertainment purposes only, and always consult with your management and site management regarding your security duty. But most of all, just stay safe and yeah, take care.